WTIM TV, brought to you by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark. I'm here in studio with University of Illinois Extension horticulture educator Andrew Halsinger. It's great to have you back here, Andrew.
Hey, it's always good to be here.
So I'm driving around out and about looking for a place for my dog to swim, and I see these like cobweb-looking things in the trees. What can you tell me what those are?
Well, they are the product of an insect. So, as you know, caterpillars, they have the capacity of making webbing and cocoons kind of thing. Kind of think of your silkworm. Well, there's some particular caterpillars, these larvae to these moths and butterflies that we see that produce that webbing. One of them is that I've seen particularly quite often is the fall webworm, and another is the eastern tent caterpillar. So they're two different species, but they have the similar effect of defoliating a little bit of your tree, but they're usually not a big concern because they just make their nest and then devour part of those leaves around there. It does decrease the photosynthetic capacity when you take away some leaves of the tree, but the overall health of the tree isn't really a concern.
With that said, are these webworms, are they a concern to maybe especially if they increase in population?
They can increase in population. In some years, we have more of a prevalence than others. But if you want to do something about the fall webworm or the eastern tent caterpillar, you can disturb their nest and maybe take a stick in there and separate it out to where it's open. They do have a lot of natural predators, including birds. So the problem that some people have is they try to use insecticides, but they're protected in that covering, and that goes for some of the other things that you might see around this time of year of bagworms. They make that bag cocoon, and the older they get, the more protected they are. And so just be aware that some of these insects have a kind of a natural protection from insecticides. So you got to look at the life cycle and see when the best time to treat is.
Are these webworms, and I beg your pardon, what was the caterpillar
called?
Eastern
tent caterpillar.
Caterpillar. I appreciate it. Are they considered invasive species or?
No, there's not really an invasive aspect to these. We do have our share of invasive pests. We've in past years had the brown marmorated stink bug. It's a stink bug. It causes some damage to maybe your tomatoes, have some damage to them. So a little bit to agronomic crops. So not too major, but the major problem that we saw when it first came into Pennsylvania was the apple crop. It caused severe damage to the apple crop and those fruit crops. Another one that's coming along has a similar, like the brown marmorated stink bug. If you have an invasive plant called tree of heaven in your area, you go scout out your tree of heaven there, and you'll probably see some of those brown marmorated stink bugs. But there's an invasive pest that's moving from the east in our direction. We haven't located it yet, but we want to be on the lookout. Is the spotted lanternfly, and so this particular leaf hopper, it is invasive. It does pose a threat to grapes. So whenever you have like wineries and things of that nature with grape production, it's a major concern for that. And we might find it on, the tree of heaven or maybe a grape vine, but we want to be on the lookout to find these invasive pests so we can manage them as they arrive. It's been found in both ends of Indiana, both the north and south.
What does this spotted lanternfly look like?
Well, it changes as it goes through its life cycle. So we have kind of a nondescript kind of looking, kind of black and white and with some red, but actually whenever it starts out, it's more just plain black and white. And then as it progresses, it gets more coloring, and it has kind of, as the wings open up, there's a lot of color, especially on the bottom part of the lanternfly. But it is a leaf hopper, and as an adult, it does have a hopping tendency to jump. But what's of real concern are the egg masses, that the egg masses can be transported, and they're difficult to see. So if you were to see them on the trunk of a tree, they're very difficult to distinguish and to find those. They look like maybe just a splash of mud. And so with these, we often find that invasive insects are transported whenever you're camping and you have firewood, or just the camping, being in an area and coming back. We saw that with emerald ash borer, that it tended to uh, stay along the route of the interstates. And so it is a concern that we might run into that kind of scenario with the spotted lanternfly, with moving it more quickly than what it would be if it, spread naturally.
What do you do, obviously with the caveat that spotted lanternfly hasn't been spotted in Illinois, maybe some sparse spottings here and there, but really isn't been fully detected. But if you do somehow come across spotted lanternfly, what do you do?
The best thing to do is let your local extension office know, or the Illinois Department of Agriculture. We do have some emails that are available to, maybe make that report. But here, as of late, we've had some reports of emerald ash borer, and you may be like, "Well, I heard about emerald ash borer, but I haven't heard about it lately." Well, the state of Illinois, they deregulated the trapping and the monitoring of it because it just became so widespread in Illinois. So with that, we kind of lost the location on the map, so to speak, of where it had spread. And so we're currently looking to maybe pinpoint a little more areas where it has been found in maybe our region here. So if you suspect you have emerald ash borer, you can reach out to me and let me know. We have to have a sample of the insect to send off and to have it put on the map that we have it confirmed here.
I know sometimes emerald ash borer can be confused with a tiger beetle. Are you familiar with that distinction a little bit?
There's a lot of confusion whenever it comes to insects. So whether it's the emerald ash borer, whenever it first was reported, you'd have all kinds of things come into the office that weren't the emerald ash borer. And I'm sure it can be the same for the spotted lanternfly or the brown marmorated stink bug. The brown marmorated stink bug, we see other stink bugs that look similar, but typically you see that white banding on the antennae and the particular patterns on the body of the insect.
What is the danger of emerald ash borer?
Well, emerald ash borer, it tunnels underneath the bark and it destroys the cambium layer. And so if you have a tree, it usually starts in the top and works its way down. So you'll notice some dieback at the edge, at the top of the canopy. And then as it progresses, you eventually find out, and you often find like epicormic sprouts, some along the base of the trunk, you'll see leaves and they'll start growing. So the danger is that it'll kill the tree. And then ash trees aren't very resilient after they're dead for staying, without losing branches or, just coming down. So then it poses a risk factor, and then you have to remove those trees. Well, if you have all these happen at once, then that really cuts into the budget. So there are some insecticidal treatments that some have utilized to maybe spread out that time frame to maybe help the budget a little bit, and also maybe for some prevention. If you keep treating the tree, you can avoid the demise of the tree. But it is dependent on the size of the tree. So the more treatment you have to do with larger trees. So you have to keep that in consideration, what the economics would be for saving your tree.
I want to talk more about some of the invasive species and what to do if you do see those invasive species in just a moment. First, have to take a short break. You just heard from University of Illinois horticulture educator Andrew Hulsinger here on the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper. Your stream brought to you by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark.
WTIM.
Chip Flory here, inviting you to join the conversation as we tackle the current issues of agriculture every weekday morning at 10:06 on the Talk of Central Illinois, News Talk WTIM. I host AgriTalk, the nation's longest-running interview show dedicated to discussing agriculture issues with the newsmakers and include you in the conversation via our toll-free number. We're here weekdays mornings at 10:06. We are AgriTalk.
This is a station editorial. I'm Randall J. Miller, station president. The word inflation is one we hear practically every day in the news. And of course, both political parties are blaming each other for it. Truth is, no matter where you go or what you buy, you're feeling its effects. I want to delve into the why we have the inflation rate at plus or minus 10% over the past year. It's simple economics, capitalism, and the marketplace. Reason number one of two. When both parties pass legislation borrowing or printing over $2 trillion, that's trillion with a T, dollars to pass out, claiming the country needed it in 2021 despite the signs the economy was doing okay, that's going to cause inflation and a lot of it. Reason number two of two. When politicians shut off the domestic oil spigot because the majority party is realizing that instead of having 4 years to pass their green agenda, they now have less than 3 months, they've got to stop anything that'll increase domestic oil supply and more, begin ramping down anything that burns fossil fuel. The problem is when you shut down increased production of fossil fuels that still power homes, businesses, and factories, you can't ramp up the green agenda to generate power fast enough. Wind and solar aren't being built quick enough to replace the fossil fuels the majority party are shutting down. That's why one of my transmitter site power bills last month went from $1,200 to over $3,100. Ouch. Well, there you have it. Simple economics, capitalism, and the marketplace. And when politicians tamper with it, it turns into a mess and is hitting our pocketbooks and will continue to do so for quite a while. When the marketplace is left alone without any tampering by the government, it works pretty well. When government, whether it's federal or state, does tamper with it, you and I will be paying more for our energy, goods, and services for a long time. That's our opinion. We welcome yours. Our email address is editorial@randyradio.com.
Jim Stepp, owner of Central Illinois Asphalt in Taylorville, helps protect your driveway or parking lot with recycled asphalt and environmentally friendly sealer. Let his 40 years of experience work for you at a reasonable price. Click his icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
The Shelby County Economic Development Corporation aims to foster, promote, and stimulate economic development. They're here to help your business grow. Find out more on the Shelby County Economic Development Corporation by clicking their icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
Your information station, WTIM.
Welcome back to the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper. Your stream on TaylorvilleDailyNews.com's Facebook and WTIM TV YouTube, brought to you by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark. I'm here in studio with horticulture educator with the University of Illinois Extension, Andrew Holsinger. We talked a lot about some of the invasive insects that you could see around this time in Illinois, but sometimes you don't think about those invasive plants either. And there's some that are right now in the area or maybe in the surrounding vicinity that you should pay attention to. And what are some of those that you should pay attention to, Andrew?
Well, one of the most prominent ones that people encounter in our area, that would be the bush honeysuckle. So the bush honeysuckle, it has opposite leaves, and you'll often find the berries in clusters of 4, some nice bright red berries. But with that, you also see those leaves more into the fall whenever everything else has gone dormant. These green leaves persist, and they're one of the first to green up in the spring. But you probably want to think about possibility of herbicide treatment. If you just cut it back, it resprouts, and so it makes it problematic for removal. They do even have tools that are called grubbers for grubbing out and removing the root system to eliminate the plant. So it does take a lot of work to manually remove it. So if you find it where it's a newly planted seedling, be sure to get that removed, because it's going to be so much easier than letting the plant get established.
What is the danger of just letting it become established?
Well, the danger is that it shades out a lot of the plants that are underneath those bush honeysuckle. So whenever it gets into our natural areas, we see our native plants suffer, that we don't have the native plant population because they're being shaded out by the thickness and the density of these bush honeysuckle.
Anything else that you want to say about bush honeysuckle?
Well, it is very prominent in the area, but another prominent invasive plant that I've seen, especially on the roadways here this summer, is teasel. So teasel, it has a very distinctive seed head, and there's lots of seeds in that seed head, and it's a biennial plant, so it takes 2 years to establish. So you may not see it that first year, but then as it bolts and puts up a stalk, and then the seed head and the flower, it becomes more noticeable and kind of an eyesore. So I've seen it all along 16, and just a problematic weed.
Why is it a problematic weed?
Well, it just is invasive, and it has some of those characteristics of just being an eyesore. And but there's others that I've seen recently. Some have been managed, but the Oriental bittersweet, it has the capacity to girdle trees. So it's a vine, and it can grow up the tree, and then as it wraps around, it can constrict and girdle the tree, and it shades out a lot of the canopy of the tree just with the density that it can grow. There's other vining plants like winter creeper, where it may have started as a ground cover, but if it goes up the tree, it has that same capacity of shading out. And it has a lot of these may have like a waxy cuticle to the leaf, and so it makes it a little harder for foliar application of herbicide. So sometimes when we treat with chemicals, we use herbicides in various ways. Some could be foliar, but there's other methods of like treating the stump. So after you've cut it, you treat the stump. Often a dye is incorporated, so that way you know which ones you've treated and which ones you haven't. And then also the hack and squirt method, where you take a hatchet, you make a wound, you hack it, and then you squirt the herbicide into that, and then it translocates. And so the fall is a good time for herbicides because we're looking at the time for translocation. The plants are going to go dormant. They're going to want to send their reserves to the root system. And so to take that herbicide down to the root system, that can make it more effective.
And you mentioned this a little bit about some of the invasive insects you find, but if someone finds one of these invasive plants, what should they do with it?
Well, they can make a report. There are different avenues for reporting. There's various distribution maps to see where it's located at. You can certainly call the local extension office or send me an email, and we can see if that is prevalent or not. I mean, some of these are so prevalent, we see them all over. And so like in Hillsboro, I see a lot of tree of heaven. It's just here, there, and everywhere throughout the community. And it does take effort to remedy these invasive plants. They don't go away by themselves, and they have the propensity for producing a lot of seeds. And so if you have that large amount of seeds, it's some of them, even like the tree of heaven, they don't need to have any cold treatment. So they're viable right off the tree into the ground, and then they're very adaptable to various locations. And so with that adaptability, they can outcompete the natives and be problematic.
That is University of Illinois Extension horticulture educator Andrew Hulsinger. Andrew, do you have any programs coming up here in the near future?
I do, but you'll have to check out the website and see. We have various ones throughout the communities here, and
yeah, all right.
Just
that's extension.illinois.edu to go find more information.
That's
Andrew,
correct.
thank you so much.
All right.
Your stream brought to you by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark. You can find those streams online on the TaylorvilleDailyNews.com Facebook or on YouTube at WTIM TV.
WTIM.